In a Virginia courtroom, Judge Anthony Trenga locks horns with Reptor's Jasmine Crockett, whose razor-sharp questions expose judicial secrets, igniting a fiery clash that could redefine justice. The air in the Alexandria Federal Courthouse was thick, with anticipation on a crisp October morning in 2025. The gallery buzzed with reporters, legal analysts, and curious citizens, their whispers forming a low hum that echoed off the mahogany-paneled walls. At the center of the storm sat Judge Anthony Trenga, a veteran jurist known for his stern demeanor and unflinching control over his courtroom. His dark robes seemed to absorb the light, casting an imposing shadow over the proceedings. Across from him stood Representative Jasmine Crockett, the Texas congresswoman whose meteoric rise in politics had earned her a reputation as a fearless advocate for justice. Today, she was not here as a politician, but as a lawyer, armed with a legal brief and a mission to challenge the court's integrity. Crockett had requested this hearing to address concerns about judicial conduct, specifically targeting undisclosed ties between Judge Trenga and prominent political donors. The issue had surfaced after a series of investigative reports revealed that several federal judges, including Trenga, had attended exclusive retreats funded by influential donors with cases pending in their courts. The reports had sparked public outrage, and Crockett, a former public defender with a keen sense of justice, saw an opportunity to hold the judiciary accountable. Her presence in the courtroom was a bold move, one that had already drawn the ire of Trenga, who viewed her challenge as an affront to his authority. As the hearing began, Trenga's voice boomed, setting the tone. "Ms. Crockett, this court is not a platform for political grandstanding. State your case, and do so with respect." His eyes narrowed, a subtle warning that he would brook no theatrics. Crockett, undeterred, stepped forward, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. She wore a tailored navy suit, her posture exuding confidence, but her face betrayed a quiet intensity. "Your Honor," she began, her voice steady yet laced with conviction, "this is not about politics. This is about the public's trust in the judiciary, a trust that is eroding because of undisclosed relationships that call into question the impartiality of this court." The gallery fell silent, the weight of her words settling over the room. Crockett's opening salvo was not just a legal argument, it was a moral indictment. She cited specific instances where Trenga had attended donor-funded events, cross-referencing dates with cases on his docket. Her evidence was meticulously compiled, each point delivered with the precision of a seasoned litigator. "The Code of Conduct for United States judges requires transparency," she continued, her gaze locked on Trenga. "Yet the public has been left in the dark about connections that could influence rulings. How can we expect faith in justice when the system hides its ties to power?" Trenga's face tightened, his fingers drumming lightly on the bench. He was no stranger to scrutiny, but Crockett's directness was disarming. She wasn't just questioning his actions, she was challenging the very foundation of his authority. "Ms. Crockett," he interjected, his tone sharp, "you are treading on dangerous ground. This court's integrity is not yours to question." The rebuke was meant to intimidate, to reassert control, but Crockett didn't flinch. Instead, she leaned into the confrontation, her voice rising just enough to carry to the back of the room. "With respect, Your Honor, it is precisely my duty to question when the public's trust is at stake. Silence in the face of ethical lapses is complicity." The exchange sent a ripple through the courtroom. Reporters scribbled furiously, their pens scratching like a chorus of cicadas. The audience leaned forward, sensing the escalating tension. Crockett's calm yet unrelenting demeanor was shifting the dynamic, forcing Trenga to confront accusations he had long dismissed. She wasn't just a politician or a lawyer. She was a force, her words cutting through the courtroom's formality, like a blade. As she paused to let her point land, Trenga's silence spoke volumes. The judge, known for his quick retorts, seemed momentarily at a loss. Crockett seized the moment, pivoting to her next argument. She introduced a series of emails, obtained through a Freedom of Information Act request, that suggested Trenga had been personally invited to a donor's private estate during a high-profile case. "These are not mere oversights," she said, holding up the documents for the court to see. "They are patterns that undermine the principles of impartiality." The gallery erupted in murmurs, the sound swelling until Trenga banged his gavel, demanding order. His face was a mask of restraint, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. Crockett had landed a blow, and the courtroom could feel it. As the first hour of the hearing drew to a close, Crockett showed no signs of backing down. She was building a case not just against Trenga, but against a system that allowed such lapses to persist. Her arguments were resonating, stirring emotions in the audience, from anger at the judiciary's opacity to admiration for her courage. Trenga, sensing the shift, leaned forward, his voice low but menacing. "Ms. Crockett, you are testing the patience of this court. Proceed with caution, or you may find yourself in contempt." The threat hung in the air, a challenge to her. "Resolve." Crockett met his gaze, unflinching, her silence more powerful than words. The room held its breath, waiting for her next move. The Alexandria courtroom pulsed with tension, the silence following Judge Trenga's contempt threat as heavy as a storm cloud. Representative Jasmine Crockett stood motionless, her eyes locked. On the judge, her defiance a tangible force. The gallery held its collective breath, the air crackling with the weight of the moment. Trenga's warning was a gauntlet thrown, a clear attempt to reassert dominance, but Crockett's unflinching stare signaled she was far from intimidated. Her silence stretched, deliberate, a calculated pause that amplified the drama. Then, with a slow, measured breath, she spoke, her voice cutting through the hush like a blade. "Your Honor, if seeking truth risks contempt, then I'll bear that cost. The public deserves a judiciary that doesn't flinch from scrutiny." The words landed like a spark in dry grass, igniting whispers among the spectators. Reporters. Pens flew across notepads, capturing the audacity of her response. Crockett's tone was calm, but the steel beneath it was unmistakable. She wasn't just challenging Trenga. She was turning his threat into a rallying cry for accountability. The judge's jaw tightened, his fingers gripping the gavel as if to anchor himself. He hadn't expected her to double down, to transform his warning into fuel for her argument. "Ms. Crockett," he said, his voice now laced with barely concealed irritation, "this court will not be lectured by a politician playing lawyer." The jab was personal, meant to diminish her, but Crockett's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. "Playing lawyer?" she countered, her voice rising just enough to carry to the back of the room. "I've spent years in courtrooms defending those the system overlooks. I know the law, Your Honor, and I know when it's being sidestepped." The gallery erupted in murmurs, a wave of approval rippling through the crowd. Crockett's credentials as a former public defender lent her words weight, and her refusal to be cowed was shifting the room's energy. She stepped closer to the podium, her movements deliberate, as if claiming the space as her own. "Let's talk about sidestepping," she continued, pulling a thick binder from her briefcase. "I have here financial disclosures, or rather the lack thereof, that tie this court to donors with active cases before you." Trenga's eyes narrowed, his posture stiffening. Crockett opened the binder, revealing a meticulously organized dossier of documents, each tabbed and annotated. She held up a page for the court to see, her voice steady but forceful. "In 2023, you attended a retreat in Aspen, funded by a donor whose company had a multi-million-dollar contract dispute pending in your court. No disclosure was filed. Why?" The question hung in the air, sharp and unyielding. The gallery leaned forward, the weight of her accusation sinking in. Crockett didn't wait for an answer, pressing forward with another document. "In 2024, a similar event in Palm Beach, same donor, same silence. These aren't oversights, Your Honor. They're choices." The courtroom was a pressure cooker. the tension palpable. Trenga's face was a study in restraint, but his silence betrayed a crack in his armor. Crockett's evidence was damning, her delivery relentless. She wasn't just presenting facts, she was weaving a narrative of systemic failure, one that resonated with the audience's growing unease. "The public trusts this court to be impartial," she said, her voice softening but no less piercing. "But how can they, when judges mingle with litigants behind closed doors? Transparency isn't optional. It's the foundation of justice." Trenga finally spoke, his voice low and clipped. "Ms. Crockett, you are speculating about matters you do not fully understand. These events were professional, not personal." The defense was weak, and the gallery sensed it, their murmurs growing louder. Crockett seized the opening, her eyes flashing with intensity. "Professional or not, the public wasn't told. That's the issue. You don't get to decide what's trivial when it comes to trust." Her words were a direct challenge, not just to Trenga, but to the entire judicial system. The room felt electric, the confrontation escalating with every exchange. As Crockett continued, she introduced testimony from a whistleblower, a former court clerk who had witnessed the pressure to bury donor-related disclosures. The clerk's statement, read aloud, painted a picture of a court culture that prioritized loyalty over ethics. "This isn't just about you, Your Honor," Crockett said, her voice now carrying a moral weight. "It's about a system that lets these lapses fester." The gallery was riveted, the emotional stakes climbing higher. Crockett's calm, assertive demeanor was a masterclass in control, her arguments landing with precision and power. Trenga, visibly rattled, banged his gavel, the sound sharp and jarring. "Enough, Ms. Crockett. You are pushing this court beyond its patience." His voice trembled with anger, but there was something else. Uncertainty. Crockett had exposed a nerve, and the room could feel it. She closed her binder with a deliberate snap, her gaze never leaving Trenga. "I'm just getting started, Your Honor," she said, her voice low but resolute. "The truth doesn't bend to patience." The gallery gasped, the audacity of her defiance sending a jolt through the room. Trenga's face darkened, his next words poised to escalate the clash to a breaking point. The Alexandria courtroom crackled with raw energy, Judge Trenga's gavel strike still echoing as his face contorted with barely contained fury. His warning to Jasmine Crockett hung in the air, a line drawn in the sand, but her defiant retort, "The truth doesn't bend to patience," had shifted the battlefield. The gallery's gasps morphed into a low rumble of anticipation, every eye fixed on the congresswoman who stood unwavering before the bench. Crockett's gaze held Trenga's, her resolve a silent challenge that seemed to unnerve him further. His next words came like a whip crack, sharp and deliberate. "Ms. Crockett, you are on the verge of contempt. This court will not tolerate your theatrics." The threat was a desperate bid to regain control, but the tremor in his voice betrayed a man grappling with the weight of her accusations. Crockett's response was immediate, her voice steady but laced with fire. "Theatrics, Your Honor? I'm presenting evidence. Evidence you've yet to refute." She gestured to the binder on the podium, its contents a silent indictment of the court's ethical lapses. "If holding this court accountable is contempt, then what does that say about justice?" The gallery erupted in murmurs, the crowd's emotions swinging between shock and admiration. Reporters leaned forward, their notepads filling with the drama unfolding before them. Crockett's words weren't just a legal argument. They were a moral gauntlet, forcing Trenga to confront the chasm between his authority and the public's trust. Trenga leaned back, his fingers steepled, his silence a stark contrast to the storm brewing in the room. He was a jurist accustomed to deference, yet Crockett's relentless pressure was dismantling his composure. She seized the moment, her voice rising with controlled intensity. "Let's talk about accountability," she said, pulling a new document from her binder. "This is a sworn affidavit from a litigant who claims their case was expedited after a donor's private meeting with you. No record of that meeting exists in your disclosures. Why? The question was a blade, slicing through the courtroom's tension. The gallery's murmurs grew louder, a chorus of disbelief and anger. Trenga's eyes flashed, his voice low and menacing. You are making baseless allegations, Ms. Crockett. I will not dignify them with a response. But the denial only fueled Crockett's momentum. She stepped forward, her presence commanding the room. Baseless? I have dates, names, and bank transfers. The public deserves answers, not deflections. She held up the affidavit, its pages trembling slightly in her hand, not from fear but from the weight of her conviction. This isn't about one meeting or one donor. It's about a pattern that erodes faith in this court. The courtroom felt like a tinderbox, every word escalating the stakes. Crockett's calm, assertive demeanor was a masterclass in power, her arguments resonating. With the audience's growing unease, she pivoted, addressing the gallery directly. The judiciary isn't above the people it serves. When judges hide their ties to power, they betray the very justice they swear to uphold. Her words struck a chord, the crowd's emotions surging. Anger at the system, awe at her courage. A few spectators nodded, their faces reflecting the frustration of a public long skeptical of unchecked authority. Trenga's patience snapped. Ms. Crockett, you are out of order, he roared, slamming his gavel so hard the sound reverberated like a gunshot. This is a courtroom, not a soapbox. The outburst was meant to intimidate, but it backfired, exposing his rattled state. Crockett didn't flinch, her voice cutting through the chaos. Order, Your Honor, comes from transparency, not silence. If you want respect, start by respecting the truth. The gallery gasped, the audacity of her defiance sending a jolt through the room. Reporters scribbled furiously, sensing a historic moment unfolding. Crockett pressed her advantage, introducing a timeline of Trenga's interactions with donors, each entry meticulously sourced. These aren't isolated incidents, she said, her voice now a blend of precision and passion. They're a systemic failure, one this court has ignored for too long. The evidence was overwhelming, her delivery relentless. Trenga's face was a mask of restraint, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt. The room could feel it. The balance of power was shifting, Crockett's arguments dismantling the judge's defenses brick by brick. As the hearing's second hour neared its end, the confrontation showed no signs of abating. Crockett's words lingered, stirring a broader conversation about the judiciary's role in a democracy. The gallery was riveted, their emotions raw and palpable. Trenga, sensing the tide turning, leaned forward, his voice cold but unsteady. Ms. Crockett, you've made your point, but if you continue this crusade, you'll face consequences beyond this courtroom. The threat was chilling, a glimpse of the power he still wielded. Crockett met his gaze, unflinching, her silence, a challenge in itself. The room held its breath, waiting for the spark that would ignite the next clash. The Alexandria courtroom was a cauldron of tension, Judge Trenga's chilling threat to Jasmine Crockett, reverberating like a distant thunderclap. His words, consequences beyond this courtroom, carried the weight of institutional power, a stark reminder of the stakes. Yet Crockett stood resolute, her silence a defiant shield against his intimidation. Her eyes, unyielding, held Trenga's, the air between them charged with unspoken challenge. The gallery, gripped by the drama, leaned forward, their breaths shallow, sensing the confrontation teetering on a razor's edge. Reporters' pens hovered, poised to capture the next explosive exchange. Crockett's lips parted, her voice low but resonant. Consequences, Your Honor? The only consequence I fear is a justice system that hides from the truth. The gallery erupted in a wave of murmurs, the crowd's emotions a volatile mix of awe and outrage. Crockett's words were a direct rebuke, transforming Trenga's threat into a testament to her courage. She stepped closer to the podium, her movements deliberate, as if staking her claim to the courtroom's moral high ground. "This isn't a crusade," she continued, her voice steady but edged with conviction. "This is a reckoning. The public deserves a judiciary that doesn't cower behind veiled threats." The room felt electric, her defiance amplifying the stakes. Trenga's face darkened, his fingers tightening around the gavel, but he remained silent, his restraint a sign of the pressure Crockett's arguments exerted. Seizing the moment, Crockett opened her binder, revealing a new piece of evidence, a recorded conversation between a donor and a judicial aide, obtained through a whistleblower. "This recording," she said, holding up a transcript, "captures a donor boasting about their influence over case assignments in this court. Your name, Your Honor, comes up explicitly." The revelation was a bombshell, the gallery gasping as the implications sank in. Crockett's delivery was surgical, her voice carrying the weight of undeniable proof. "This isn't speculation. This is a donor admitting to buying access, and this court's silence enabled it." Trenga's composure cracked, his voice rising, in a rare display of agitation. "Ms. Crockett, you are peddling hearsay. This court will not be slandered by unverified claims." The outburst drew a sharp intake of breath from the crowd, his loss of control a stark contrast to Crockett's measured intensity. She didn't flinch, her gaze piercing. "Unverified? I have the audio, Your Honor, ready to be entered into evidence. Will you hear it, or will you dismiss it like the disclosures you never filed?" The challenge was brazen, her words a gauntlet thrown at Trenga's feet. The gallery's murmurs swelled, the crowd sensing a pivotal moment. Crockett pressed forward, her arguments weaving a narrative of systemic betrayal. "The issue isn't one judge or one donor," she said, her voice now a blend of passion and precision. "It's a culture that prioritizes power over principle. The public sees it, and they're demanding answers." She gestured to the gallery, where spectators nodded, their faces reflecting the frustration of a populace fed up with opacity. Her ability to connect with the audience was magnetic, her words stirring emotions that rippled through the room. Anger at the system, hope for change. Trenga, visibly shaken, attempted to regain control. "Ms. Crockett, you are manipulating this court for publicity. I will not allow it." His voice was sharp, but the accusation felt hollow, a desperate attempt to deflect. Crockett's response was swift, her tone cutting. "Publicity? I'm here for the public, Your Honor. People who trust this court to be fair but see judges dining with litigants instead." The gallery roared with approval, a few spectators clapping before Trenga's gavel slammed down, demanding order. The sound was jarring, but it couldn't drown out the shift in the room's dynamic. Crockett was no longer just a challenger, she was a voice for the voiceless. As the hearing's intensity peaked, Crockett introduced a final piece of evidence, a petition signed by thousands of citizens demanding judicial reform. "This," she said, holding up the document, "is the public's voice. They're watching, and they're done with excuses." The emotional weight of her words was palpable, the gallery's energy surging. Trenga's silence was deafening, his authority eroding under the weight of her evidence and the crowd's support. He leaned forward, his voice cold but unsteady. "Ms. Crockett, you've gone too far. This court will not be dictated to by mob sentiment." The accusation was a spark in a powder keg, the gallery bristling with indignation. Crockett met his gaze, her voice calm but unyielding. "Mob sentiment? This is democracy, Your Honor. Ignore it at your peril." The room held its breath, the confrontation reaching a fever pitch. Trenga's next move could either diffuse the tension or ignite a firestorm, and every eye was on him, waiting for the breaking point. The Alexandria courtroom was a crucible of raw emotion. Judge Trenga's accusation of mob sentiment met with Jasmine Crockett's searing rebuttal. "This is democracy, Your Honor. Ignore it at your peril." The words hung like a challenge, the gallery's indignation a palpable force. Spectators shifted in their seats, their faces a mix of defiance and hope, while reporters scribbled furiously, sensing a historic moment. Trenga's eyes burned with frustration, his authority teetering under Crockett's relentless assault. The tension was suffocating, every gaze fixed on the judge as he gripped the gavel, his knuckles white. "Ms. Crockett," he said, his voice low and trembling with barely contained rage, "you are inciting chaos in my courtroom. I will not allow it." Crockett's response was swift, her voice a blade of calm resolve. "Chaos, Your Honor? No, this is clarity, the public demanding a judiciary that serves justice, not power." The gallery erupted in murmurs of agreement. A few bold spectators clapping before Trenga's gavel crashed down, the sound sharp but futile against the rising tide. Crockett stood unwavering, her presence a beacon of strength. She gestured to the petition on the podium, its thousands of signatures a silent army. "These voices aren't chaos," she said, her tone steady but fierce. "They're the heartbeat of a system that must be accountable. You can silence me, but you can't silence them." Trenga's face was a storm of conflicting emotions. Anger, uncertainty, and something new, vulnerability. Crockett's evidence, from donor-funded retreats to the damning audio, had stripped away his defenses, exposing the judiciary's flaws to a riveted audience. She seized the moment, her voice rising with moral clarity. "This court has a choice," she said, addressing both Trenga and the gallery. "Hide behind tradition or face the truth. The public is watching, and they won't forget." Her words were a rallying cry, the gallery's energy surging as spectators nodded, their frustration with the system finding a voice in her. The judge leaned forward, his voice cold but unsteady. "Ms. Crockett, you presume to lecture this court on its duties. Your arrogance is astounding." The insult was meant to wound, but Crockett's lips curved into a faint, defiant smile. "Arrogance? No, Your Honor. This is conviction. I'm here because the people deserve better than a judiciary that buries its conflicts of interest." The gallery roared, a wave of applause breaking through Trenga's attempts at order. His gavel pounded, but the sound was drowned out by the crowd's fervor, a testament to Crockett's impact. Sensing the climax, Crockett delivered her final argument, her voice a blend of passion and precision. "The code of conduct for judges demands transparency, yet this court has hidden ties to donors with cases before it. That's not a mistake, it's a betrayal." She held up the transcript of the donor's recorded boast, its words a stark indictment. "This recording proves influence was bought and sold. The question is, will this court act, or will it protect the status quo?" The challenge was direct, her gaze locked on Trenga, daring him to respond. The gallery held its breath, the weight of her words settling over the room like a verdict. Trenga's silence was deafening, his face a mask of restraint. For the first time he seemed smaller, his authority diminished by the force of Crockett's truth. He cleared his throat, his voice quieter now, almost reflective. "This court will review the evidence presented," he said, the words grudging but significant. "The hearing is adjourned." The gavel fell, softer this time, a reluctant acknowledgement of defeat. The gallery exploded in cheers, the sound reverberating as Crockett gathered her papers, her composure unbroken. As the crowd spilled out of the courthouse, the air buzzed with conversation. Reporters swarmed Crockett, but she waved them off, her focus on the broader impact. Her arguments had sparked a fire, prompting calls for judicial reform across the nation. Social media lit up with clips of her confrontation, her words trending as a symbol of accountability. Trenga, meanwhile, faced mounting pressure, with legal scholars and activists demanding an investigation into his conduct. The hearing had shifted the narrative, exposing the judiciary's vulnerabilities and empowering the public to demand change. Crockett stepped into the October sunlight, the weight of the moment settling over her. She had faced a titan and emerged triumphant, not through theatrics but through unyielding truth. The victory wasn't just hers. It was the public's, a reminder that democracy thrives when power is held to account. As she walked away, the courthouse behind her, Crockett knew the fight was far from over. But for now, justice had found its voice, and it echoed far beyond the courtroom's walls.